Hello and welcome to another episode of the Motorway Man, and welcome back to my wonderful series where I'll be looking at all of the service station operators, and in today's episode we'll be looking at Welcome Break. So to start us off, here are some basic facts. So Welcome Break's newest site is Newark on the A1, which opened on the 1st of March 2023, making it at the time of this video's release the newest service station in the country. They have their headquarters at Newport Pagnell Services. Their biggest site is the 2-floor high South Mims Services on the M25. Their smallest site is Derby South on the A50, and by far their two most popular services are Hopwood Park, Dawn the Channel, and South Mims on the M25. So let's get into the video, and as always we'll be starting with the history. And although the Welcome Break name only goes back to the 1980s, their history goes back much further, as they own the oldest service station on the motorway, Newport Pagnell, which opened in 1959. So to understand the origins and history of Welcome Break, we must first understand the history of Forte. Now, in the early days of service stations were the biggest operator, so it began bidding on sites as early as 1959 and continued through the 60s and the 70s. Forte were making lots of money and bought out probably the most famous name on the motorway, Little Chef. And having bought out Little Chef, they began branding some Little Chef-owned sites, and this branding seemed to work very well. So they diversified even more, and for the larger sites Forte named them Welcome Breaks, because after a long journey a break was very much welcomed. Now the first Welcome Break branded service station opened in 1983, and as the new concept worked so well, Forte even called all of their service stations Welcome Breaks by 1988. And at this point, it's important to remember that Welcome Break was not its own operator, it was just a new name being used by the old operator, Forte, just to clarify that for you. Around this time, in the late 80s and early 90s, Forte began to kit out Welcome Break with a number of facilities. These included bakeries, KFCs and Little Chefs. Forte even gave Welcome Break their own hotel chain at one point, called the Welcome Lodge, and Forte was so successful they even brought out a French service station chain, and temporarily began to brand them Welcome Break, meaning at one point there were Welcome Break services in France. But unfortunately, Welcome Break in France didn't last long, as the owner, Forte, rebranded the French site Côté France to appear more appealing to the local French people. So as we can see, Forte was a large, profitable service station operator. They owned French sites, British ones called Welcome Breaks, and there was almost no competitors on Forte's level. Well, almost none, because there was one, and that operator was called Granada. Now, Granada was the biggest service station operator in the country at the time, and we can learn a full history of them in a future video. But in the 1990s, Granada was a major player in the world of service stations. They owned 60% of all the service stations in the UK, and Forte owned part of the remaining 27%. They were Welcome Break sites. So to increase their ever-growing monopoly on service stations, Granada purchased Forte in 1996, and Welcome Break was included in the deal, a deal worth over £500 million. Now Granada owned 80% of all the service stations on the motorway. And around this time, it aroused the suspicions of the Monopolies and Mergers Commission, now called the Competition Commission, who said that Granada had taken away all competition and was not being fair in keeping business competitive. So the Competition Commission forced Granada to sell some of their sites, and Granada sold their Welcome Break sites to a very rich man in 1997, meaning for the first time, Welcome Break became an independent operator, and that deal was worth £474 million. So now Welcome Break was finally independent, they could operate all of their own service stations, and they opened some exciting new ones as well, such as Hopwood Park. But unfortunately, after a brief success, Welcome Break struggled to stay afloat during the 2008 financial crisis, so rather than sell their service stations, they sold their hotels, with the last Welcome Lodge closing after being sold in 2009. Nowadays, Welcome Break has two hotel partners, Days Inn and Ramada. And after handling the financial crisis fairly well, Welcome Break continued to purchase new sites, such as buying Cardiff Gate, and they even started diversifying away from the motorway and having facilities in other places. As we can see from the image on screen, Welcome Break has facilities in the shopping centre. How interesting. Now things quietened down in the 2010s and things ticked along quite nicely for Welcome Break until in 2018 they received an offer from an Irish service station operator who had solely been breaking into the UK market, Apple Green, and in the end Apple Green purchased Welcome Break for £361.8 million. Now Apple Green were already successful in Ireland, operating 7 Irish service stations and lots of smaller services in the UK. Apple Green transferred many of its small UK sites to Welcome Break control, and this led to new partnerships, for example, working with Greggs. The new ownership brought within new investment, with plenty of money being pumped in, and with the opening of Welcome Break's first truck stop, for example, called Rothwell, opening in 2018, and the first service station to open since the Apple Green takeover was Newark. How interesting. And that brings us to the present day and the future with Welcome Break. And as always, the future is exciting, with Welcome Break planning to open Vale of York services on the A1M and the absolutely incredible Rotherham Sheffield Gateway services on the M1, which is going to be huge. As you can see from the picture on screen, it looks spectacular. It's going to be one of the biggest in the country when it's built, and I can't wait for us to visit Rotherham Sheffield Gateway services together in the future. Now, next up, after the history, of course, it comes to logos. So in the top left, we can see the original logo from the 1970s, which looks very nice. And then in 1984, the first Swan logo was introduced. And if you look closely, you can see Forte's name in the corner. Next, in the top left, we can see the Swan logo used from 1988. And in the middle left is the temporary logo used when Welcome Break was owned by Granada. After becoming an independent operator, they were back and revisited the Swan logo. Until 2006, the Swan was removed completely after complete modernisation, making the green colour scheme that we all know and love today. So there's some cool logos over the years. So next up, Welcome Break's great brands, for example, KFC, Subway, Waitrose, WH Smith, Starbucks, Greggs, Chopsticks, Pret, just to name a few. Now for reference, the following are all Welcome Break service stations: Abington, Bertrand Green, Burton Wood, Cardiff Gate, Charnock Richard, Cawley, Derby South, Fleet, Gordano, Gretna Green, Hartshead Moor, Hopwood Park, Keele, Membry, Leicester Forest East, London Gateway, Rothwell Truck Stop, Michaelwood, Newport Pagnell, Newark, Oxford, Rotherham Sheffield Gateway, Sarn Park, Sedgemoor, Oxford Pear Tree, Telford, Warwick North and South, Vale of York and Woodall. And additionally, like I was saying, Welcome Break now own and operate a number of Apple Green sites in the UK. They are Cromwell, Darlington, Fosse Way, Kate's Cabin, North Muscombe, Spalding, Spaldwick, Whitley and Boston. Now, time for the past Welcome Break services then, and in their history, Welcome Break has once owned Barnsdale Bar, Pease Pottage, Dover Port, also known as Port of Dover, Ross Spare, Grantham North and Popdock Mill. And finally, we come to the motorway man's favourites. So, my favourite Welcome Break service station that I've been to is, surprisingly, Warwick. It's always quite quiet and has everything you need. If you wanted to learn more about Warwick services, by the way, I do have a 2-part series on Warwick services, north and south, for you to check out. I would also say that South Mimb services, Heel services and Hopwood Park services are also very nice. Tours of them all on the channel, by the way, as well. And as always, I do wish, Welcome Break the best for the future. And speaking of the future, it is very exciting with the likes of Rotherham Sheffield Gateway services coming soon and everything like that. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. I do hope you've enjoyed today's special episode on Welcome Break. Make sure you come back next Wednesday and we'll be looking at Motown. But until then, make sure you're subscribed because you don't want to miss it, of course. And I do have a service station tour coming on Sunday as well. So make sure you check that out and goodbye.